in addition to making America great again, you're going to see this big movement take place. We're going to win on Election Day this year, November 5th, and we're going to see fundamental change to the country to take us back to the system where everybody has an opportunity.
I'm Carson Jorgensen. And this is the Carson Jorgensen Podcast. Hey everybody, one of the questions I'm most often asked when it comes to agriculture is, how do we find your products, or where do we buy local? Folks, the guys at Crofter have been working on solving just that. They've created a marketplace that connects the producers to the consumers. You can get high quality products shipped to your front porch. Also, if you're a producer and you need an easier route to get your product to those consumers, visit crofter.com. Fill out the producer application and become a distributor on that marketplace. Again, that's crofter.com for high quality agricultural products shipped directly to your door. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast today. Today joining me is a dear friend of mine, Tommy Hicks. Tommy is a former co-chair at the RNC. Tommy does a lot of great things across the country, and he has a unique insight into what's happening and what our elections look like. He's seen it from inside and from outside. So Tommy, thanks for joining me today, man.
Hey Carson, great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's always good to see and hear you, that's for sure. So why don't you, before we get started, why don't you introduce yourself? A lot of folks may or may not know you.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm Tommy Hicks. I live in Dallas, Texas, happily married with 3 young girls. And the young girls are pretty much the reason why I got into politics. We need to save our country. But I've been an investor my entire professional career. Took some time off to get involved back in 2016 with the Trump campaign, and kind of never looked back. We're on a big mission to save our country. When I was up in Washington, D.C., I spent a lot of time meeting people from around the country and people inside of D.C. who, really care tremendously about the future. And so when I left the RNC to go focus on family and business, I started a couple of companies that I think are going to be instrumental in helping protect the future for the American people. They're mostly technology businesses that can serve both dual use in terms of U.S. national security and also in the commercial sector. So it's been quite an interesting run, but I've learned a lot and met some really good people, and extremely optimistic with in terms of the people in our country who want to see a better future for the next generations.
And I think that's an important thing to note, and for people to understand that this is for the future generations, and it's our kids that really ultimately what matter. And same for me, that's really why I got involved in politics in the first place, And so you were around in 2016. You were around in 2020, and here we are in 2024. I mean, Trump's appeal in 2016 was he was a political outsider. Nobody knew who Trump was. Nobody knew what was going on. They just wanted change. And in 2020, call it what you want to call it stolen, call it everything else just went wrong for us. There was a lot of people, frankly, that were like, okay, we like the policy, but I don't necessarily love the man. So I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. And they got what they paid for. And so now 2024 rolls around. What's different now than 2020? Because there's a lot of people out there that are fairly pessimistic that are like, it's just going to be just like 2020. What do you think is different about this cycle than it was in 2020?
I think in 2016, the American people wanted an outsider to disrupt what is Washington, D.C. It's a cartel between the people, the unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., the establishment in Washington, D.C., their partners in the corporate media and on Wall Street in Silicon Valley. And you saw in 2020, a lot of entities team up together to censor the American people, to delay the announcement of the vaccine, which was a phony vaccine, until after the election, and did a lot of things that were counterintuitive to what we believe democracy, a republic, should be. And so I think you've seen a track record in the last 3.5 years with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, which has woken people up to the fact that we need an outsider to lead us in Washington, D.C., again, to represent we the people. And that outsider is a former president, and Donald J. Trump. And I think you've seen a remarkable change in who the Republican Party is. We are now the party for the middle class, the working class, for those left behind by the elite. And so we've got an unbelievable movement taking place in all 50 states, frankly, even California. You're seeing people
Sure.
come together, and whether you're blue collar American, a black American, a Hispanic American, Asian American, younger Americans, all sorts of people are coming into the Republican Party. We are the Big Tent Party, and it's going to be a movement that lasts for a long time. I fully think 75% of the country is with us, but we've got their partners, the Democrats' partners, and the DC cartel's partners in the so-called mainstream media that only let a certain amount of information out. So when people understand exactly what it is we stand for, when Bobby Kennedy can go talk to the American people about making America healthy again, in addition to making America great again, you're going to see this big movement take place. We're going to win on Election Day this year, November 5th, and we're going to see fundamental change to the country to take us back to the system where everybody has an opportunity.
No. And I think you touch on something that's extremely important that people, the Democrats care about two classes of people. And you may or may not have heard me talk about this before, but they care about two classes of people: the credentialed elites and the dependent poor. That is the only people that the Democratic Party cares about. And that's something that I believe Republicans need to talk about more often, because to your point, I think that you're absolutely spot on that Americans are looking for somebody to represent them again. I mean, there are unions in play for Republicans now that never have been in the past. You've got Robert Kennedy, again, a former Democrat. You've got Tulsi Gabbard. You're putting together this coalition of forgotten Americans, it feels like. And I think that that's what 2016 really was. 2020, I mean, it was just a fog of war to me. There was just so many things going on with COVID and everything else. But right now, I believe that the Republican Party has created a coalition of middle Americans. And I think that that should and will be what carries the day, because the Democratic Party has moved so far away. Again, you've got Bobby Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, a handful of Democrats that are now actively working with President Trump to say, hey, what's going on in the Democrat Party is going to ruin our country. And frankly, has been ruining our country for the last 4 years.
Well, and in the end, politics is all local, right? And so you're seeing defections from the Democrat Party to the Republican Party in county sheriffs across the country. You're seeing that, and right here in Dallas, the mayor of Dallas, it's a nonpartisan position, but the mayor of Dallas is a lifelong Democrat. He happens to be a very good friend of mine. And over the past 10 years, I've been telling him he is not a Democrat. And finally, he got to the point where he said, "You're right, I'm not a Democrat." And he switched the Republican Party. And that's really important if you think about it. If you can get more and more mayors to realize that they are Republicans, that they believe in the freedom of the individual in small businesses and law enforcement, keeping their citizens safe. You have 80% of the population who lives in urban environments. So this movement's going to continue to grow from Main Street America into the cities, and we're going to be safe and more prosperous again once we get there.
Yeah, but we've seen what weakness looks like over the past 4 years. You've seen what the Democratic Party, you've seen their policies in action. You've seen open borders. You've seen wars in the Middle East. You've seen the war in Ukraine. You have seen our strategic oil reserves drained and then done away with. We have seen our military kind of back to a laughing stock again. It has become a party of policy that doesn't matter to 95% of Americans. And that's my opinion. I mean, that's what I see from the outside. But show me one thing. Show me a single place in this country that's better off, be it a city, a state, or the country itself, that is better off because Democrats are in charge. The last thing, no, you can't. You can't point to a single one. And the last question that anybody should be asking themselves, whether that's a Republican governor, whether that is Republican state legislators, whatever it is, the last question that anybody should be asking themselves right now is what do the Democrats think about it? Because we have seen that their policies don't work. Blue cities are an absolute wreck, and their policies on a national level and on a global scale are ruining our country, and they're making the world a chaotic place to live.
Well, I mean, the American people are a lot smarter than the Democrats and the media think they are. And so, what has made our country great? It's been the small businesses. It's been the individual. It's been the people who settled the West. It's been a government that works. It's been a federal government that works for we the people. It is not the other way around, which is what the Democrats seem to think it is. They seem to think Washington D.C. is in charge, and we all work for them. No, the answer is they work for us. They work for we the people, and we're going to tell them November 5th that we're back in charge.
Yeah, and we have been and will be. So, with the Republican National Committee, you were back at the Republican National Convention, and we saw messaging from the party that we haven't seen in a long time, and that is everybody. We're all on the same team. We're all working together. We are small business owners. We are frankly Americans, and contrast that with what happened at the Democratic National Convention, which was 90% of the time all they talked about was Trump's an orange Hitler. I mean, that was really the subject. Like you could summarize the entire DNC with Trump is orange Hitler. Like that was the messaging. But I see a turn within the RNC. And you spent a fair how many years were you at the RNC?
2 terms for 4 years, and it was an
Yeah.
honor of a lifetime to work with people like yourself.
Yeah, and that's where Tommy and I met when I was state chairman of the Utah Republican Party. We met Tommy when he was co-chair of the National Party, and now you have Michael Watley and Laura Trump that are running the party, and they're doing a phenomenal job, I believe. What do you see happening, Tommy, that's different within the RNC now than when you were there, and what role do you think the RNC is going to play in the upcoming election?
Look, I was just with Chairman Watley yesterday. They are laser focused on this election, and it's interesting because the leadership of the RNC right now has been effectively merged with the Trump campaign. So they're focused on 7 or 8 battleground states. They're very focused on turning out the vote. They're focused on election integrity. I believe their target is to hire or bring on at least 500 lawyers per state. Plus, I think their original goal was 100,000 people will be watching, monitoring polls, et cetera. I think they're at 170,000. So you're seeing volunteers, you're seeing enthusiasm that's going to make their job to get people out to vote much easier. I think we're also seeing a broader emphasis placed on getting people out to vote early. And so you know this, but to your audience, it's really important to get people out to vote early because this is a game of resources. And when you're having to chase votes all the way to election day, it's going to cost you more and more money. And we need to bank those votes early, make sure that we spend what remaining resources we have to get those voters out in the places that we need to get out. And frankly, we should win the presidential election. We should win back the Senate, and we should hold on to the House based on track record alone. But we know the Democrat machine is formidable. They're raising a ton of money, and it's time for the American people to speak up and show up to the polls, and we've got to win with such a great margin that we make it a point to Washington D.C. again that they work for us, and it's not the other way around.
Sure. So you touch on something there that I come back to time and time again, and that's voter apathy on the Republican side of the party. We have a lot of conservatives that don't show up to vote. You have a lot of Republicans that never show up to vote. And you see so many people are like, what can we do? What do we need to do to win? Show up and vote. Get your neighbor to show up and vote. If you have to rent a freaking bus, get them to the polls. And that's what needs to be done, in my opinion, because you see so many people that'll sit back and complain and say, oh, this is so terrible. My business is suffering because the federal government doing all these things. And then you ask them, well, did you vote in the last election? Well, no, I don't vote. Well, there's your problem. And people say, oh, one vote, it doesn't count. It doesn't matter. It means nothing, but it does. It really, really does, because we've always seen the Democrats. That is one thing I'm always a little bit disappointed in Republicans over, where Democrats beat us up every time. And that is excitement about getting people to the polls and going out and getting ballots and chasing those ballots and making sure that ballots are out and ballots are back in. And I think the Republicans, I've seen a big push from them this year that I haven't really in the past to make sure that we use every avenue that's open to us and we chase those ballots and we make sure that they end up in the box because that's what's going to win us an election come November.
Well, exactly. And I'm not in the prediction business, but I will predict that we will lose if everybody who's listening does not get out and vote. And if they don't get their friends out and their family out to vote. And you have friends and family all over Utah and the country, just call them. Like in Texas, we start early voting on October 21st. So I plan on going to the poll at 7 a.m. on October 21st and voting the minute I can. And then I'm going to spend the rest of my time between then and November 5th going out to all my friends in Texas, making sure they vote for Donald J. Trump, for Ted Cruz, for Beth Van Dyne, my congresswoman. And then also, I'm going to start working with my friends all over the country, making sure they do the same thing. They get their friends and their family out to vote because we want a better life for our children.
Yeah, no, and exactly. So here's another point that I think that needs to be made. You talk about this race is going to be decided by about 8 states. I mean, we're talking the swing states, but you've got states like Nevada and Arizona right now, and I talk about those two because they're the ones closest to me. But we have Nevada and Arizona. We need both of those and to make sure that we win, and it's going to be decided by a 1%, 2% margin. And so I think it's ultra important that we do focus on every single vote because every single vote in these small states is really going to matter.
It matters. It matters simply to win, but also it matters in terms of a mandate. If we win by a large margin, President Trump, who was the 45th president and who will be the 47th president of the United States, is going to have a mandate to go fix things, and that's when we run up the score.
Yeah. So I think the other thing too that again is missed oftentimes when we're talking about nuances of the elections and what happened down ballot races because President Trump, yeah, we need him for the president for sure. But what we also need is a Republican controlled Senate and a Republican controlled House. Because I mean, we saw what they did last time. They just ran him through the ringer and it was one witch hunt after another. It was the Russia hoax and the Steele dossier, and then it was impeachment, and then it was January 6th, and it was on and on and on, and it never quit. It was a quid pro quo with Zelensky. Think of how much Trump could have actually see how much he got done, but think how much he could have gotten done had Congress not been fighting him. So that's another thing everybody needs to understand too. Is it's not just the presidential race. Yeah, 100% it's the top of the ticket and it matters. But it also matters to have a Republican led Senate and House because that's going to be just about as big of a change maker as it is to have him in the presidency.
Yeah, and you said it yourself. It's amazing what President Trump was able to accomplish between 2017 and 2021 when he was president. But imagine how much more could have been done, and especially had he won in 2021. But so what you've also seen, and this is really important, is the American people and the Republicans have woken up and they understand that we are fighting against an entire system here. And when we do win, it's going to this mandate will be for change, and it's going to be great. I mean, I'm so excited about what the future looks like when you have less government pressure on regulations, and it's going to help us start businesses again. It's going to help small businesses compete against Wall Street and all these multinational corporations who thrive under regulation. What makes America great is small business, is the person down the street who started the laundromat, the sheep farmer in Utah. It's America's ranchers, farmers. It's the small businesses that are going to make us thrive.
Yeah, I mean that is American exceptionalism as at its finest, and it seems. I mean, now we're going back and we're talking about nuances, but it seems a lot of folks have lost the vision of American exceptionalism and what America looks like, and it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch people lose their pride in their country. I mean, you see people, and you've seen it for years. I understand that, there's always been people burning flags in the streets and people disrespecting the country, but it seems now more than ever that becomes more and more of a problem, and they've lost that vision. But it also trickles down to their children because now some people's kids are like, we don't live in the greatest country, but we do. and you have the opportunity to go right, but it makes it so it trickles down into businesses, it trickles down into entrepreneurship, it trickles down into the work they put in every day because it doesn't matter to them. And I think there is a resurgence of American exceptionalism, this America first ideals that should and can drive our country in the future and bring it back to what it was before.
Absolutely. And you know what? I've had the privilege of being able to go around the country when I was RNC co-chair and met with people. I went to almost all 50 states. I went to 49. I missed North Dakota, which I can't wait to get to. But it's been what was amazing to me is seeing people all over the country who still believe in the American dream. And they pray for our country and they pray for our leaders. They pray for, collectively all of our children. These are people who love life, who love opportunity, who love freedom. The heart and soul of America is still here. We're just waiting to unlock it, and it's going to be unlocked in November.
Yeah. And I mean that was what Reagan talked about when Reagan ran, is unlocking the ability for Americans and turning loose our energy sector and letting the bright minds and the things that we have in this country take over and make it what it is, because that's truly the secret. People ask, what is the secret to America and why has it done what it's done? It's because of freedom, the ability to think how you want to think, the ability to do what you want to do, like you and your business ventures. There's nothing outside the realms, even necessarily on this planet, that is going to bind us anymore. And I see that coming back, and it does give me hope again. And the younger generation, you've seen it. You've traveled the country now. You have some younger kids. You spent some time with Turning Point USA. You see this younger generation. Is it just me? Or do you see this, not the millennials and not the Gen Xers or whatever they're calling them now, but this new generation of Gen Zs, ones that are kind of getting out of high school right now? Do you see a more conservative base coming out of those, like I feel like I do?
You mean the ones who got locked down during COVID, and they understand what tyranny is, and they will not take it. So that generation will probably end up being most liberty loving generation of all of them. But you go back to what makes America great. That sense of freedom, the personal ownership of your future. That's something that with President Donald J. Trump, he was able to connect with the American people. He helped them unlock their own future. He's done that his entire career. I've known President Trump for over 2 decades, and you saw that in the Trump organization. You could go from valet parker to vice president at Trump org if you did a good job. And so Trump wants to see people succeed. People who work hard and try will succeed in Trump's America, and that's the future that we have if we elect him as president.
Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned that, because that's one thing I wish I've had the opportunity to meet President Trump and spend just a small bit of time with him. And the one thing I've noticed, and one thing I wish that everybody had the opportunity to see, is who Donald Trump is on a personal level. Um, I've had the ability to, just sit with him, and I tell this story. They were shepherding him along. They were in a hurry to get him somewhere else, and I just happened to be in the way. And he stopped to visit with me, and one of his handlers said, "Mr. President, we don't have time for this. We need to move on." And he looked at her and he said to her, "I will leave when I'm done talking to this guy." And that meant everything into the world. I mean, it meant everything to me, because this is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful person on the planet. And they are ushering him along, telling him, "We've got to go, we've got to go." And he took the time to stop to talk to a sheep rancher behind the curtain at a rally in Wyoming. And it meant everything to me, but I've seen that interaction with others. That's always been your interaction, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, he deeply cares about people. He asks questions. He remembers things. He's incredibly detail oriented. He wants the best out of everything and everybody. But yeah, I've seen him. God, the first time I met him actually was on a plane ride back from Florida to New York back when I was working as an investment banking analyst. And there was some bad weather, and he literally, I think, flew back like 50 people who were stranded in Palm Beach. And I was up front, and he was asking me questions about all sorts of stuff and, sports. He knew details that I was just like, and I thought I was a really knowledgeable sports fan at the time, but he knew more than I did. And then I'm an investment banking analyst, so I know a lot of things about a few different companies that I'm focused on. And he knows everything about those companies and what's going to make them better in the future, how they get through their whatever competitive issues they have or market issues they have. And I was like, man, who is this guy? And sure enough, he becomes the 45th president of the United States. But he is constantly talking to people. He has more data points that go into his brain to help him compute the right outcomes. He has a very unique ability to listen to people and take in data points and make decisions. And so he's a fascinating guy. He's extremely talented. And I think he thrives when he's around people and seeing them do well and providing them with the resources they need to be successful. And that's what he's done for America.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So this time around, the first time he got his feet wet, I think that he expected something and he got in and it was way worse than he ever could have imagined. But you're seeing a coalition develop again. The tweet from Elon Musk a couple weeks ago. See, I find like this is the most entertaining cycle that I've ever been a part of because you've got, again, Robert F. Kennedy, Elon Musk, people like Dana White. Everybody's weighing in on this one this time. I mean, Taylor Swift, fault her for what she does, but she's weighing in on it too. So you have the who's who and the what's what. But what I find fascinating, and it's going to be very interesting to watch, is what Trump's going to actually do. And I know we're not Nostradamus, but do you think that he expected something last time and got more than he thought, and that this time he's ready to clean house or to really proverbial drain the swamp this time?
Well, again, what he accomplished in the first term was nothing short of amazing, and that's before you factor in him having his hands tied behind his back. I mean, what they did to the Trump administration when they went in with Michael Flynn within 2 weeks of them taking the oath of office was unbelievable. But he was, whether it was Russia, the COVID issue, or the impeachment, he came out and made our country a better place. So I think he will take that 4 years of hard work and whatever lessons needed to be learned and come out with the right team and be ready to focus on. And that I think this first 100 days is going to be the best 100 days of governing we've ever seen, and it's going to be amazing what he accomplishes.
Yeah, well, what I'm very excited about, and I pray that it actually comes to fruition, is Elon Musk's offer of creating an office of government efficiency and accountability. Because I so much with all the desperation in my soul want to watch Elon Musk walk into these 3-letter organizations and just absolutely cut everything, because there would be nothing greater than to watch that happen, because it's exactly what has to happen.
Oh, it's going to be amazing. And Trump took a special amount of pride in the amount of deregulation that they put forth in his first term. I think the goal was 2 deregulations for every 1 new regulation, and I think it ended up being almost 10 to 1. And so I think if you have somebody like Elon or any number of people who've said they want to get involved in that, you're going to see a deregulation economy thrive like you've never seen an economy in the U.S. thrive before.
Yeah. No, and that's honestly what has to happen. So another thing that I wanted to touch on, and I think this is extremely important because there's a lot of people still sitting on the fence that don't necessarily love Trump as a person, but also realize that their life was better underneath the Trump administration. And that's the question I believe that the Trump administration, the only question they should be asking, is it better now are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? They should also be asking Kamala Harris on a daily basis, okay, you've got all these plans. Why haven't you done something already? You're the vice president of the United States. You have all these grand ideas. Why haven't you done them already? But for those people out there, and I doubt very many of them watch my show or listen to my show, but for those out there who are on the fence about Trump, and who don't necessarily love him as a person, what would you say to those people and those voters?
Well, first of all, yes, track record, Trump's track record versus the track record of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And that's where we come into play. That's where all of us who are talking right now come into play. The media has shown, both with Joe Biden and with Kamala Harris, that they will not tell the story about what Trump's track record was and did for the American people versus what just happened under Biden Harris. And so it's our job collectively to go out to our friends, our neighbors, and our family and make sure they understand that, yes, we can be better off today, tomorrow than we are today because we will have a new leader in the White House. 100% of the American people would admit, unless you're an unelected bureaucrat or a think tank person in Washington, D.C., that life was better under Trump than it is today. And so I think we just need to articulate that and get people out to vote. I think when you have a growing economy, you can forget about whatever demographic you're in. If the tide is rising, we all benefit. If the economic tide is rising, you have less crime. You have a better life. Everything gets better when you have less government regulation stifling the free market. And so I think that's just an easy thing for us to go out and evangelize.
Yeah, sure. The other thing that I see a lot of people are worried about and a lot of people are talking about, and you may have some insight, and honestly, I don't know what can or is being done, but people are awfully nervous Trump's not going to make it to the election. I've seen now we've had two assassination attempts, maybe more that you never even hear about. But how is the Trump campaign feeling in regards to that? What are spirits looking like? And I mean, I'm sure you've talked to the president post at least Pennsylvania. What is he thinking? What's he feeling?
It's, got to pray for President Trump and for all of our friends and family who are putting their lives on the line in this crazy time right now. But pray for everybody's life and safety. I think President Trump has said it several times in public. He feels like God's hand is involved in helping save our country, and he feels like he's part of a divine intervention for the United States of America. And I believe that. I 100% believe that. I know
Yeah.
you do, and a lot of the people listening to us today would agree with that. But look, this is not going to be easy. And I pray for the president's safety every single day.
Yeah, and I mean, George Washington talked quite a bit about it. Anybody that's ever read Glenn Beck's book about becoming George Washington, he talks about it quite frequently. And again, for those who want to believe it, go ahead. For those who don't, it's your cup of tea. But for me, the United States of America is a divinely inspired place, and God's hand in creating this country is one of the most important things that we all need to recognize. And again, it's God's hand that's going to, be the end all be all, but he also needs people out there to lift for him. He can't do everything. And it's your hands that are going to ultimately make the difference in this election. He can help as much as he can, but faith without works is dead. And folks, it's time to get out there. It's time to do your part to make sure that this is there for our children.
Yeah, God's going to make us work for this great outcome, and it's going to be a great one for us.
Yeah. We can alleviate our own suffering in this one, and we're all going to have to pitch in and make sure that it happens. But, Tommy, is there anything you want to leave anybody with, kind of closing thoughts? Because, we're getting toward the end of our time. I appreciate you coming on here today.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. Appreciate all of your friendship. I loved working with you, and I guess we're still working together
Sure.
today. We believe in this great nation, the United States of America. We want to make our country a great place for future generations, for my young kids and their future kids and future grandkids, and it's going to be a fight, but God is on our side. And we're going to have to go work for it every single day for the next 47 days until Election Day. And look, things will work out the way that they're supposed to. And I believe with all my heart that Donald J. Trump will be our next president, that Republicans will win the Senate and will keep the House if we all pitch in and make sure we get people out to vote. And we are ambassadors for the cause of freedom everywhere we go, whether we're in line for gas, in line at 7-Eleven or wherever, on an airplane, wherever we are, at church. Have the conversation. Make sure people understand what exactly is at stake. Get involved. Get involved for this election. Get involved in the future. Get involved with your school boards. Politics are local. We need people to take ownership and get involved before it's too late. And so I'm just so happy to be on this show with you and to be a part of this movement with you. And God bless America.
Amen to that, brother. Thanks for coming on, buddy. It's always good to see you, and I'm sure we'll see you again here shortly. Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you turn on your notifications so you know when we release a new episode. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all soon.